So, before we get started, you've had a chance to go over the questions. Any questions you don't want to answer, you don't have to, okay? Just like we talked about, if there's anything here you don't feel like answering, let me know, okay? If there's anything you want taken out also, just say so in the video and then I'll cut it later.
Perfect.
All right? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Elle. I live in Denver, having a great time. I work in IT and really love to ride my bike.
Cool. All right, you can say how old you are, you don't have to.
Oh, I'm 29, originally from Nebraska.
Okay, and I think that gets us started. Can you tell me about where you grew up?
So I grew up in a very small town in Nebraska, lived just right outside of the city limits out in the country. That classic, think of Nebraska, drove past a John Deere, right next to a cornfield, all the stereotypes there. The community I grew up in was very, very, very conservative. At the time, I thought very accepting, but it's very easy to accept everyone that thinks the same way that you do, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, well, can you describe your family from sort of like a religious standpoint? Do you feel like that goes for your family as well? Was your family different from the surrounding community?
Very, very religious, and I would say the majority of the community was extremely religious. Everyone went to church on Sundays, went to Sunday school. After that, my parents actually, when I was in middle school, they actually taught my Sunday school class. So yeah, just very religious, and I grew up being taught that God created everything, and so I didn't know this at the time, but that was called being creationist and stuff, and so that was definitely something that I learned later on, that's what I grew up with, and my parents would definitely probably, if they were told that, they would probably consider themselves creationists.
Was it weird for you that your parents taught your Sunday school class?
No, I was really excited. I was super stoked about it. My sister was embarrassed by my parents, but I think that's a lot of like, oh my God, don't, like, Mom, Dad, you're embarrassing me. But I was always very open to having my parents in my life, and I was very excited to have them as my Sunday school teachers, and I never felt like they gave me special treatment or anything. There was always like maybe 3 or 4 of us in the Sunday school. It was a very small town, like 4,500 people were in the town. Mm-hmm. So everybody knew everybody. And the church I grew up in was a Methodist church. And I would say Methodist as a whole, progressive, but where I grew up, it was still very traditional. Like, there were not women pastors, like homosexuality was not accepted at all growing up, that sort of thing. Whereas in other places in the Methodist church, that was already accepted. And, yeah.
Okay. So other than Sunday school, did you have a religious education?
No, the only religious education that you could get in the town was at a Catholic school. So there were about 6 kids in my class going into middle school that they actually came from the Catholic school. Mm-hmm. And that was the size of the school, was that. But I guess now that I think about it, my preschool was actually at a Lutheran church, but I never really thought about it as a religious school. It was just, they just had a preschool there, and we learned how to share and care. I don't remember anything religious during the preschool time that I was in. It was definitely just around Sunday school, and then in high school, it was, although it was a public school, so this probably wouldn't technically be legal, but there were actually teacher-led prayers. There were we actually had a Bible school that one of our teachers led on Wednesday mornings, and I would go into his history class and go to his Bible study and stuff like that. So. Mm-hmm.
Okay. How religious was your friend group growing up?
They were religious. Probably a lot of them didn't necessarily go to church, but if you asked them, they would say that they were Christian. I, at the time, assumed that everyone was religious and everyone believed in God, and I actually remember the first time one of my classmates, he said he was atheist, and that like really shocked me, and I really regret the way I reacted to him. But at the time I was like, so you're a devil worshiper? Like, I just had no concept of what atheism was, and just all the stereotypes of what you think atheism is. That's what I thought it was. And I remember looking at him and just like, you're not atheist, like what do you mean? Like it was just a concept that just had no bearing on me, where I was like, of course there's a God, like there would not be one, so how, what do you mean you're atheist? So that was definitely a shock to me, and just could not compute at the time. I think I was 16 okay. At the time. I think I was a junior in high school.
Just going back to something that you said earlier, you said that even for like Methodists, your church was like a little bit kind of more conservative. Mm-hmm. At what point did this kind of become clear to you? Like, at what point did you realize that even within the Methodist church, your church was not as liberal as, let's say, other churches were?
It wasn't until I left my hometown for college and just seeing how other Methodist churches interacted with their community. Actually, a great example of that is a Methodist church that's on Colorado and 7th. There's a Methodist church there that they have like a gay pride flag, all of that. I highly doubt that even now the church I grew up in would do that. Like, just, I think they would be like under the rug, like it's okay if you're, like we'll deal with the fact that you're gay, but there would be no sense of pride in that sense. And that's where like seeing stuff like that from other Methodist churches definitely made me realize, wow, we're not at all like how Methodist churches are in other places. And then I would also hear from people like, oh yeah, Methodist, like very progressive. And I'm like, nope, not where I grew up. Nope, okay. Definitely not.
So you mentioned one of your classmates was an atheist. Other than that, did you have any friends or acquaintances even that were just other faiths in general? Were they all Christian? Was there a mix?
No, not until I would say not until I even moved to Denver, probably.
Wow.
I didn't meet anyone else college. One of my teammates on the volleyball team, they were Mormon, and to me, that's completely separate from Christianity. And, at the time when I was like still like teetering, it was just like, oh, Mormon, like that's crazy. I mean, just not even like conceptualizing that someone could see what I believed in as being on the same level of like, why would you believe that? But that was definitely something where like meeting someone that was Mormon, and then moving to Denver, then that's when I met people that were of different religions, and just and then even just learning more about Judaism was very fascinating to me. Meeting someone that was Jewish but not necessarily believing in God, and just kind of learning about the cultural aspect of how religion can be more of a cultural thing than necessarily a faith thing for some people. And that was really fascinating to me, because as someone that was Christian, once I was no longer Christian, I don't practice that stuff anymore. Like there's nothing, I don't have no drive, because that's all based on believing that there is a God, that is something that's there. So why would I ever, still say prayers or go to church or, that kind of stuff. And so that was really fascinating to me, is meeting other people that practice aspects of the religion still, but not having the faith part.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So you mentioned that the first time you kind of really got a chance to interact in any significant, it sounded like to me, in a really significant way with other faiths that weren't Christian, was when you moved to Denver. Was there a tipping point or a series of points where you realized you weren't believing anymore? How did that happen for you?
Yeah, so that happened while I was still in college. The person I was with, when I first met them, they said they were agnostic, and at the time I was like, okay, so they just like think something's out there. Like I can work with that. Like I can get them to the faith, get them to believe in God and all of that stuff. And then later on, they said they were atheists, and that was kind of like, oh, what do you mean? And then that was where they then just kind of explained, I just lack a belief in any God. That's it. Like, there's nothing outside of that. There's, you know, and we would have discussions of like, well, but then like, how do you think, you know, everything happened? And that was kind of learning, like, that's a separate point, but this is how I think things became to be and stuff. And they actually introduced me to, I don't read books, I'll listen to audiobooks, and so they gave me an audiobook called The Magic of Reality by Richard Dawkins. And I was listening to it. It was like an 8-hour drive from, I lived in Kansas at the time going to college, and driving back to my parents' place in Nebraska, it was about an 8 or 9 hour drive. And so I had a lot of time to listen to this audiobook, and they did a really, really great job of explaining things that I never really understood before as well as I thought I had. Like, evolution was a great example of that. I got taught in school that you had some algae and then it became a fish. Why would I ever believe in that? Like, that's just as crazy as creationism. So why can't God just create all of that? And so in that book, they did a much better job of actually explaining it to where I could conceptualize how change over time can happen. And so that was kind of a moment where I was like, okay, that's weird for me to like think about this differently. It also talked about, you know, things like the rainbow, for example. There's other religions and there's other things that have this same story, and like Gilgamesh and stuff like that. There's other things that have the same exact stories that are in the Bible that are actually older, and that blew my mind as far as like, what? No, like, these are actual stories that happened because of Christianity. And so there were just kind of those little things from that. And then I started watching a lot of debates and stuff between Christians and atheists and stuff. And at first I would kind of be on the side of the Christian, and then after a while it was like I would kind of side more with the atheists, as far as like they would just have better answers. Like, because a lot of times that I would run into just like, well, God did it. Like, it was just like learning about the God of the gaps of, you know, anything that you can't understand, then it would be just including God in it then. And then I'm realizing like that's not a very good answer though, and like so starting to question more. And then there became a moment where I just kind of thought, okay, God is just so powerful that he can just, if someone believes in something, like say if they believe in reincarnation, then that's what happens when they die. If someone truly believes in what they believe, God is so powerful that they can just make that happen. Like, I believe Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, I will go to heaven, God will do that. I was so desperate to hang on to my faith that God was real, that I needed him, that I needed that in my life. And then I think there was just a day where it was like, it was just kind of like, why are you holding on to this? Like, there's nothing that's going to change my life tomorrow if I believe or don't believe in a God. And then it was just kind of it after that, and I cried, and I, you know, just all of this stuff. And at my partner at the time, I remember telling them, like, I've wasted so much of my life, like, believing in this and really, really caring and all of that. And like, just like, I'm actually like feeling a little emotional just thinking about it again, because of like, because I think I was also angry, and I felt lied to, and I felt just so many different emotions. And what I did like that they said to me was, no, like, it was good that you still went through all that. It wasn't a waste to go to Bible school. It wasn't a waste to go, and I went to summer camps and stuff that was all around religion, and that wasn't a waste because it made you who you are today still. And, you know, they still instilled into me good morals and a good path to be a good person. And so that was like a good realization too, that it wasn't a waste, and it was just, you can still take good things out of religion even if you no longer believe in it.
So it sounds almost like it got stretched and stretched and stretched, and then there was just like a day. Did something specific happen that day? Or it just was like you woke up?
I was playing World of Warcraft, and it was just like I think just kind of like a moment of like, oh God, like it's all a lie. Like, it wasn't that, but just I think that was just the emotion that I felt at the time.
You said that you had heard from your partner that, you know, it wasn't a waste because it did kind of help build you up. Do you still feel like that's true? Do you feel like there is stuff that because you said you haven't been able to take tradition from Christianity because it's not, there's no tradition that's really devoid of faith, but do you feel like there are certain aspects that you have been able to carry forward? Yeah,
that's a really good question. Just thinking back on, again, like the community I grew up in, very supportive. It was really nice to go, you know, when you go into the church that I grew up in, everyone knew me. Everyone, you know, when my parents still go to that church, they will ask about me. They will want to know how I am. They, you know, it's a family. And that's something that I definitely really cherish, of just having so many people that cared for me and probably still do care for me. And I guess, like, I think about, you know, religious holidays like Christmas, for example. Like, I'll still go home and celebrate Christmas with my parents, but for me it's like a family day, and I don't really, again, and with my parents on top of that too, like they'll ask if I want to go to service and stuff, and I'll just say, like, I'm not really feeling like doing that and stuff, because I did go 1 year after I was no longer believing it or anything, and I just felt like I felt like an imposter in a sense, because everyone around me still thought I was this religious person and stuff. Like, I was, you know, like very, very religious. And then I just kind of felt like I was lying to everyone around me, even though no one really has to know, but it was just, I just wasn't honest with myself. And on top of that, just listening to what they were saying at the pulpit, I just was like, I can't, like, who would believe in this? Like, I don't know. It was just kind of a, like, moment of, like, oh, no, I don't like this anymore.
It sounds to me like the resources you had that sort of reasoned you out of religion, those were just sort of, you know, you mentioned Richard Dawkins, there's kind of the online theistic debate space, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you had resources once you left the faith? Was there some place that you turned to of, like, all of a sudden there's all, I don't know if you felt like there was a gap in your life that needed to somehow be bridged. Was there something that you could turn to? Was there some kind of, you know, community or specific, you know, source of support you had? What
yeah, there really wasn't. I did think about going to like looking up, you know, atheist groups. Like, I had heard of, you know, people that are very used to, you know, going to something on Sunday, you know, worshiping, all of that stuff. And I had heard about these groups of atheists that would still get together. They wouldn't worship anything, but it was still just kind of that routine that you're used to. And I thought about going to one of those, but I never really did. And it was just basically my partner at the time was my support group, and that was about it.
Were they also formerly religious?
No, they never were. That was very interesting to me, was that their family was, not their immediate family. Their immediate family was just more, maybe, but religion was never really talked about in their home, and that's something I found really fascinating too, of that, you know, they never, I think maybe a few times in his life that he went to, like, church for a Christmas, you know, sort of thing, and that was it, or Easter, that kind of thing.
Okay. Is this something, being secular, do you describe yourself as an atheist?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is this something...
Agnostic atheist.
Agnostic atheist.
Yeah.
Lack of belief, not a belief.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you feel comfortable talking about this with your family?
No.
With your friends?
Yeah.
So your friend group knows?
Yep.
Your family does not?
Yeah, correct. There's only one family member that knows, and it was actually, so I was previously married, and it was my aunt that actually married my former partner and I, and I told them beforehand that I was atheist, and that was something that I felt like they should know if they were going to be marrying us, and that he was also atheist, and that was where she wanted to know, you know, kind of like, well, why do you want to get married then if you're not religious? And so it was kind of just, to me at the time, well, that's the next step. And, you know, like to really show our commitment, our love, all of that. And then also on top of that as well, you know, there's the just legality things that you just can't do when you're not married, like insurance, all of that kind of stuff. And she's always just been very supportive, and she was actually someone that I've found very fascinating with her religious journey, where it wasn't until she became more religious. She has a lot of master's degrees, and the last one she got was in, what is it called, theology, or is that, yeah. She got her master's degree in theology, and then she moved out to California, became a pastor. She left her career as an engineer for GM, like she was making bank in Indiana, and it wasn't until she moved to California and she became a pastor, and then she came out as being lesbian. And that was like just like a whirlwind for me at the time, because I was still very religious, grew up being told, you know, that's a sin, that's not acceptable, that's, you know, just all of that stuff. And so I was very fascinated that she came out after the fact, after becoming a pastor, and it was really interesting to hear her justifications for that, as far as following the Bible still and stuff. And she was just kind of, I wish, I need to re-ask her this question because I don't remember her reasonings, but she was just telling me that there's a lot of philosophers that would say that the Bible doesn't mention homosexuality at all. It's just us that have interpreted it that way, which is really interesting to me, and I think makes sense if you do believe that God created you the way you are. You know, no matter if you like the same sex or not, why would he, you know, create sin in that way? And that's what she kind of delved into. So she was the only one that knows. And then she was actually the first person I called when I came out myself as being queer and stuff. And that was just like, it's nice for that. But when it comes to my parents, I just, at the time and even now, I see them so little that I just feel like I would really, especially my mother, I think I would feel like I would be hurting her if I said I wasn't Christian, because they're so religious that in saying that, I'm going to hell. And I don't want my mom to think about me burning in hell for the rest of eternity, because I know that she cares for me so much, and she would feel so sad for me, and I don't want her to feel sad for me. I don't want any of those feelings to come in when I just have so little time to see them when I do. And it's just, yeah, I mean, but to say that, if they ever did ask me, if they ever saw this video, you know, that sort of thing, I would not lie to them either, though. It just never comes up. And I think there's probably a reason for that too, because they probably don't want to know either. And that's just kind of the way it's been at this point.
So just to like go to the experience you just described. So it sounds like your aunt was, I would say, a different flavor or a different type of Christianity that your parents were used to.
Yeah.
But do you feel like outside of your family, you were kind of like for secular person? Because it sounds like your aunt kind of bridged that gap. Would you be considered the first kind of like secular person your family group would interact with, your friend group?
Friend group now, almost everybody I know is not religious. And that's a very interesting change for me. Is I used to think that everyone around me was religious, and it was a very big switch for me, especially moving to Denver, of meeting so many people that weren't religious at all, and just kind of having that, like, oh God, like I forget, like I still, because there's still times where I do think that, like, oh, everyone's still Christian, like it's just, you know, that's just a given, but like that's not the case at all. And for my family though, I would say my sister, so she's atheist, and that was also, I think, a big reason why I didn't tell my parents either, is that she had such a visceral reaction to her no longer being Christian. Like she was very abrasive, very like coming home, arguing with my parents. They would get into fights, you know, it was just like she would come up to me and like try like, why do you believe in this? And like, you know, there's so many different, you know, I remember her like sticking up her hand and it's like, you just believe in this one thing, but there's so many other, you know, different religions out there and stuff. And I'm still in high school at the time. I haven't traveled anywhere, and I'm just like, okay, no, I'll get back. But yeah, that's where like it was such a different reaction too, where she was almost anti-theist. I don't know if she still is now, but like just like totally against religion and just angry, and I think that really pushed me away from telling anybody as well. And then I think the rest of my family though is still pretty religious.
You don't consider yourself an anti-theist?
No. But somewhat. I don't know.
Okay.
There's things about it that make me mad, but I think there's still some good.
Okay. Legit. As I guess we can say former Methodist Christian, or just a former Christian, depending on how you view yourself.
Former Christian.
Yeah. What do you think is the best and worst advice that you've received about coming out as an atheist or agnostic atheist, secular?
So since being atheist, what's the advice that I've been given?
Yes.
Now that I'm no longer religious?
Yes. Has there been any at all?
Yeah, there was, it wasn't advice given directly to me, but it was another interview I was watching. I really like Penn Jillette. I don't agree with a lot of his philosophy and stuff, but I think he really he's a really good speaker, and I like the way he describes his feelings and stuff. But he was talking about how, so he's a libertarian as well, and he was talking about how to be a good, and I don't know what he means by good, but to be a good atheist and libertarian is to have faith and hope in people. And that's kind of where I think my faith has turned into, is, you know, I still definitely, I think, needed to drive that faith in somewhere else, and I definitely have a lot of faith in humanity, and I want to believe that people are going to do the right thing, even though I accept that that's not necessarily true for a lot of it, but it's something that I want to ultimately believe when I meet someone for the first time, like when I met you guys. Like, I didn't think there's some shitty humans over there. I thought, wow, these people look really great, but that's how I feel about everybody, is where I have that positive intent that they're going to be a good person until they prove me wrong, which that might not be the best take, because I think you can get burned pretty easily that way, and I think I've been very lucky in that sense that I haven't. But yeah, and then as far as bad advice goes, I don't think I've really gotten bad advice, but I guess it would be just, you know, having that negative outlook on everything. I mean, that's definitely something that I think I need in my life sometimes, but yeah, I don't think overall though I've really been given bad advice though.
What advice would you give to somebody who is having doubts?
It's not as complicated as you think. I guess is like to say that you're atheist or something, like people put a lot of baggage on that word and stuff, and I think people think that, you know, saying that you're atheist automatically thinks that, you know, you think that there's no God. Nope, it's just, you know, I haven't been shown any evidence to see that there is a God, and people that are questioning, I would say, you know, keep searching. I would definitely recommend watching debates if that's something that you can do, of, you know, just watch debates with different philosophers that have different viewpoints from yours. Challenge yourself in that way to see a viewpoint from someone else's perspective. Learn about other religions, like The Magic of Reality. That was a really great book to learn about other religions and stuff, and kind of realize that one of the things that I really liked, that I think it was Richard Dawkins said, that, you know, he's asked people do you think if you grew up in a place where Muslim was the dominant religion, would you still grow up Christian? Of course not. You would grow up Muslim because that's the dominant religion. You became Christian because you grew up in a Christian town, and you went to Sunday school and you went to that, but you would probably be Muslim and practicing Islam if you grew up in this other place. And so that's something we're just kind of realizing that, you know, you're a product of the, what's this, there's a phrase for that.
Product of your environment?
Yeah, product of your environment, exactly. And that was really interesting to me.
How is your life different now that because you're out to most of your friends.
Mm-hmm.
You're definitely out to your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How is your life different now? What's changed?
I question things more. I'm definitely a skeptic. I'm less apt to believe something at face value. That was definitely, I definitely appealed to authority growing up a lot more. You know, what an adult said was law, what an adult said was truth. And that was definitely realizing, you know, oh, just because someone just confidently says something does not mean it's true. And that was definitely something that was not a concept to me when I was younger, of like, oh, obviously, like, they seem like they know what they're talking about, I'm going to do that. So I think my life is different in that sense of where I'm much more open to learn and research versus just taking something at face value and, you know, like understanding, listening, but then going back and be like, let's look that up and actually see where their talking points came from. So I definitely question things a lot more.
And finally, you mentioned this a little bit, but I kind of want you to explain it in your own. And this is the last question. We're going to close the mic after this. You mentioned that you're an agnostic atheist. What would you say your stance is on religion now?
I think there's a lot of, there's good in it, but I think there's also a lot of danger in it as far as the dogma and stuff that can happen. And I think it can drive people to do things that the religion itself says not to do. You know, I just think, like, there's a lot of, I think, hate and bigotry that can come out of religion, as far as, like, because people will talk and people will just come up with their own interpretations, and that can sometimes be a very negative interpretation. And I think just, like, the power that stems behind religion and how it can control societies, and that definitely, I feel some anger towards that, but I think there's definitely still some good aspects of religion that where you can have a kind and loving community and stuff. So I'm definitely torn, I think is a good word for that, where I'm definitely torn on religion.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to participate in the Secular Stories project, feel free to reach out via the email in the description below or through Facebook at Modern Contemplations. Participation can be completely anonymous and your identity can be protected. Thanks.